Hello, it's Seb, and today I'm going to be talking about my 3 sacred books. Why sacred rather than favorite? I think favorite sort of implies like the ranking, right? Like they kind of are at the top of a list of books that I've kind of compared for quality or joy that they inspire or whatever. And I do have favorite books, but this is kind of different. These books for me sort of shimmer above rankings. They're books that I can open to any page at random and get some sort of wisdom, some sort of comfort, and like something that is just like in terms of craftsmanship, as like writerly craftsmanship, always impressive. They're often new things as well. Like I can always go to them for new things. I do have favorite books as well, but like maybe that'll be another video. These ones are just the ones that I worship. So to begin with, I'll start with the only one of the 3 that I actually have here. It's a funny thing that like also I never have all of them at the same time, just kind of by chance because I'm moving around or whatever. I never have had all of these 3 books in my personal library at once, which is also kind of nice, I think, because it means at different periods in my life I only have the 1 or 2 that I can dip in and out of. But I know they're there. But anyway, yeah. So first of all, the one that I have now is this one, Pedro Páramo by Juan Rulfo. This was written in 1955. It's a very slim novel or novella. It's a ghost story about a young man whose mother dies, and on her deathbed she asks him to go to her hometown called Comala and find his father and get what he owes them, she says. So he goes off on this sort of what seems like a kind of heroic journey to find his father, and then he finds out that the town is sort of withered and dry, and it's kind of questionable whether anybody who's in the town is alive or dead. This novel was incredibly influential. Amazingly, Juan Rulfo only wrote 1 novel in his lifetime, and he's still like one of the main Mexican like writers. And like, I don't know, I've always thought that's amazing that you could, set out to be a writer, write 1 great book, and then just be like, I did it. I'm a great writer now. I wrote a masterpiece. Don't need to do anymore. I mean, he did write short stories, which I haven't read, and I'll read one day. But yeah. Pedro Páramo is his only novel. I don't even feel rough about it. I don't even feel like, why didn't he write more masterpieces for us? Like, this is enough. It's really slim, but it was originally much bigger, and then he said that like his writing of it was a process of elimination where he kind of narrowed everything down to its fundamental core. So often when you're reading it, especially because there's lots of mixing between ghosts and present people and like the past and the future all coming together, like it can be kind of disorientating, and trying to figure out the plot and the order of things is part of the fun of this. It's sort of like ghostly fragments all put together, telling the story of this village, of this family, and of this community which ends up becoming a slave to and ultimately being destroyed by one man's vendetta. Of course, that's Pedro Páramo. He's like a sort of a monstrous sort of ghostly leech, which is always mentioned by other characters in the novel as we go through. So there's always the question of who exactly is Pedro Páramo? How did he exert such power and influence and such a sort of negative and evil presence on this town? Next up, I don't have the actual book with me, but I do have a sort of placeholder. That's this one, Tales from Ovid by Ted Hughes. This is all my books fell down there. This is a selection of poems by kind of translated and adapted by Ted Hughes, who's a poet I like. It's a selection from the Metamorphoses, which is 1 long, massive poem in a really big book by Ovid, Publius, what's his name? Naso Publius Ovidius, I think, or maybe Publius Naso Ovidius. Anyway, we call him Ovid. I wouldn't class this actual book as one of my sacred ones because I haven't read it all, and it's it's a poetic translation and it's only a selection. So it's like for me kind of an abridged version on top of being like kind of distinctly this Ted Hughes' voice being used to sort of bring these stories to life. I've enjoyed what I've read of this, but it's not for me Ovid. I would recommend the translation by David Rayburn in the Penguin Classics edition, which is the one that I first read. The Metamorphoses was written in the year 8. It's a long epic poem, and in the opening lines it sets out its kind of aim and themes. It tells you this poem is going to be based on the theme of change, transformation. So it's going to tell us it's going to almost catalog a bunch of transformations that have happened, starting with the beginning of the universe, how that came into being, and ending with the apotheosis of Julius Caesar. I don't think he says Julius Caesar at the beginning. He says like up to our present times, but when he was writing, it was in the reign of Augustus. So I'm pretty sure he ends it with Julius Caesar sort of transforming into some heavenly creature, or like being deified, right, becoming a god. So yeah, there is a sort of political bent to it, although like I think you have to take into account living in the Augustan age meant that if you wanted to be a successful poet, you probably had to praise the regime and the Roman Empire, and the things that led to the Roman Empire. But for the most part, this is a collection of Greek myths. So this is one of the most influential books in the Western canon. It kind of, a lot of the stories in this gave rise to the version of the Greek myths that we know and love today, like Medusa and Narcissus. A lot of these myths that we know, the version that we know is Ovid. And the reason that we know it is because the Renaissance happened and a lot of people kind of popularized Ovid's versions of the myths through paintings and sculptures and retellings and so on. Also Shakespeare and like lots of other people have thought Ovid is just the bee's knees and, you know, heavily drawn from the Metamorphoses for their own works. That's one of the joys of reading Metamorphoses now, or dipping into it, is that you find things that you know, from like Romeo and Juliet to lots of classical paintings. I don't know much about painting, but yeah, you just find so much that you already know that was obviously drawn from the Metamorphoses. The thing that's important as well, though, is that it's really pleasurable, it's really fun to read. It's kind of a heavy tome, and it seems like it's an encyclopedia in one way of myths. But on the other hand, he uses the theme of transformation to bring everything together, like unified under this one story. So you always know there's going to be a transformation at some point, and you're kind of looking forward to it usually. Sometimes the transformation, by the way, is just like a mood change, not necessarily a human turning into a tree or an animal, but usually it's a human turning into a tree or an animal. But he kind of bends what transformation actually means, because for him it's like the fundamental principle of everything basically. But yeah, as well as the transformations happening like in the narrative, they also happen in the form of the text, because I keep just tossing this book from hand to hand, so I'm going to put it down. But yeah, it goes through all these different almost like genres. Sometimes something seems very political and then the political tension resolves into like a romance, or sometimes something seems really funny like a comedy and then suddenly it veers into horror. So in the moment you were laughing, suddenly you're holding your hand over your mouth because someone's head just got ripped off by his own mum. That was a particularly good story. But yeah, Metamorphoses, 2,000 years later, and it's still got basically everything you need in it. And my third sacred book is The Word Book by Mieko Kanai, or Tangoshu, written in 1979, translated by Paul Blackburn, I think it was. This one is a collection of short stories, but as you go through, some of the stories kind of tie together, not narratively necessarily, or well, it takes on a sort of novelty feel to it, I think, by the end of it especially, which I really like, things that kind of blur the short story novel format, although there have been few that I like the idea, but there's been few that I can say that I really loved. This is one of them, obviously. And yeah, Mieko Kanai just kind of experiments with words and language and thought. This is the most abstract of the ones here. And often, like, I don't know what the story is about, but it makes me think and feel a lot, which means that, as far as I'm concerned, it's successful. So there are a lot of kind of tropes or images that repeat. I think it's not just in her writing in general, but specifically in this book. For example, writers. She writes about people who are writing and who are trying to find inspiration for writing. One of the stories near the beginning is there's somebody who they meet someone on a train. Trains is another one, lots of trains in this book. But yeah, she meets somebody on a train who tells the story of how he was a writer and then he was seeing a woman, and that woman was seeing somebody else who was also a writer, and he left his journal in her apartment. So the first person finds the journal and finds out that the journal is writing all of the stories that he himself was writing. So it's a kind of doppelganger situation where it's kind of unclear who is the author of the journals, and there's this sort of jealous rivalry and love triangle thing. And I don't remember necessarily how the story resolves itself, or if it does, but that's the thing, these stories aren't plot based. They're based on like kind of a concept, kind of strange coming together of things that don't really make any sense logically, but have an internal logic which you're invited to try and understand. And through that, I don't know, it's sort of enriching. at least I feel enriched like when I read these stories. So that's why the word book is also on this list. There is a fourth book, and I'm not sure if it belongs on this list or not. For all of these books, I think I didn't immediately categorize them after reading them. This is a sacred book or something like that. It's only after time, like maybe about a year or something, that the book keeps coming back to me and I keep coming back to the book, that I kind of decide, yeah, it belongs in this special category that I've created. But yeah, there's one that I read, I think 2 years ago now, was it? Yeah, Comet in Moominland. Maybe more than, maybe 3 years, gosh. But yeah, Comet in Moominland by Tove Jansson, the kind of the first official Moomin book, although the second one in the series. But yeah, it's about a magical creature called Moomin Troll and his friends in the valley, and there's a comet that's going to destroy their home and, you know, presumably the Earth. And so they set off on a little adventure, meeting friends and going to an observatory to kind of find out what's going on and what can we do. And as it turns out, there's not much they can do. So it's got this balance of whimsical, fun, great, really kind of entertaining, flawed and yet simple characters, and this feeling that like something terrible is on the horizon, and, you know, like everyone kind of knows that it's coming, but they're still going about life and being kind to each other. And it's a book that completely wrecked me, and I need to read it again, I think, or listen to it on audiobook before I can decide if it's like the fourth sacred text for me. But it is, in any case, whatever I categorize it as, something which I found really profound and worthwhile and that I want to return to. So yeah, those are my four. When I was younger, I think I had some books which I didn't classify necessarily in this way, but like Hamlet and The Picture of Dorian Gray were books that I had on my shelf that I just went back to them like frequently and flipped to a random page and then read for like 5 to 10 minutes and then put them away again, and felt just kind of cleaner. I don't know, like my neurons had been kind of rejiggled or resparked or something. So I guess I still had the kind of relationship with certain books when I was a teenager, although I didn't classify them in this special way that I do now. But yeah, I'd be interested to know, does anyone else have a similar way to thinking about books, or do you have certain books that you keep going back to and that kind of refresh you, that you can just skip to a random page and instantly kind of be sucked in and immersed in the best way possible? So yeah, let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye bye.